Continental started out as a one-off, designed specifically for the personal use of Edsel Ford, based on the Zephyr. It had a lower belt line and hood, being only slightly higher than the fenders. To compensate for the loss of interior volume, the cab was pushed back more towards the rear, making the trunk smaller, so the spare was mounted outside to the rear of the car. The running boards were also removed. A positive response to the car encouraged Edsel to put it into limited production, and as the styling was considered European, the car was named Continental. Introduced as a 1940 model, wheelbase was 125 inches, length 210, and weight 4,000 to 4,300 pounds, offered in coupe and cabriolet. It used the same 4.8-liter, 292 cubic inch V12 with 120 horsepower as the Zephyr. Prices started at $2,800, and just over $400 were made the first year. 1941 models got push buttons to replace the traditional outside door handles, and styling was updated for 1942, squaring off the look and increasing length to 218 inches. Production would soon stop in response to the war effort, but the Continental would return in 1946 with a more pronounced grille and a $4,400 price tag, although production was still under $500. The car would carry on until 1948, when restructuring would move Lincoln down market and away from specialty classics. Although the rear-mounted spare tire would become a trend in the aftermarket, that would be commonly known as a Continental kit. But soon Ford wanted to revive some of that ultra-luxury image, and the Continental name was revived as a new division above Lincoln in 1956 with the Mark II. At almost $10,000, it was easily the most expensive American car at the time, and it was aimed squarely at the Rolls-Royce Silver Cloud. It was only available as a hardtop coupe and had a rear spare tire bulge. It used a 126-inch wheelbase, was 218 inches long, weighing 5,000 pounds. The engine was Lincoln's 6-liter, 368 cubic inch V8 with 285 horsepower and 402 pound-feet of torque with a 3-speed automatic. Standard features included power steering, power brakes, power windows, power seats, power vent windows, tack, low fuel warning, and a hidden fuel filler door to prevent the riffraff from stealing your gas. But the focus of the car was quality, with much of the assembly being done by hand in the fashion of classic coach-built cars. Horsepower would increase to 300 and torque to 412 for 1957, when its high price proved to be too much going into the recession, meaning it only lasted 2 years, with total production under 1,800. It would be replaced in 1958 by the Continental Mark III, although this was little more than a top trim level of the standard Lincoln, and it cost $4,000 less than the Mark II. Like normal Lincolns, it ran on a 131-inch wheelbase, was 229 inches long, and weight was 5,000 to 5,700 pounds. It used a 7-liter, 430 cubic inch V8 with 375 horsepower and 490 pound-feet of torque. For 1959, the Continental brand was technically gone, but the car would still become the Mark IV, with minor updates that included moving the Dagmars, or bullets, to the outer edges of the bumpers, and overall length was down by 2 inches. Horsepower was also down to 350. The Mark V of 1960 would again see styling updates that included more traditional bullets, as well as an updated instrument panel, making it a 1-year-only thing, while output was down to 315 horsepower and 465 pound-feet of torque. But for 1961, all Lincolns were Continentals, and the Mark designation was gone. That is, until 1968, when the growing popularity of the personal luxury touring coupe would give Lincoln its own version of the Ford Thunderbird. It took on the Mark III designation, ignoring the previous Mark III, IV, and V. Dimensions were similar to the Thunderbird, with a 117-inch wheelbase, 216-inch overall length, and 7.5-liter, 460 cubic inch, 365 horsepower V8. It was introduced as a '69 model, but earlier 1968 production models had some minor yet distinct interior details from the later production models, although these changes happened over the course of months and not as a single update. The car revived the Continental spare tire hump and got a classic radiator-style formal grille that would become the trademark Lincoln look for the next 2 decades. It also had hidden headlights, and most were sold with the optional vinyl top. Starting at around $6,600, it was $2,800 more than the similar Thunderbird, with '68-'69 production being just over $30,000, and it became an instant rival for Cadillac's Eldorado, being the first Lincoln to match Cadillac sales, model for model. Minor updates continued for 1970, including some interior trim that included a new steering wheel, new wheel covers, and hidden windshield wipers. Radial tires and the vinyl top became standard, and regulations saw the addition of a locking steering column and a secondary air injection system, or smog pump. 1971 gained more standard features that included tinted glass, climate control with air conditioning, and SureTrack anti-lock brakes. Along with Ford's Thunderbird, the Lincoln was restyled for 1972, now as the Mark IV. Wheelbase was lengthened 3 inches, length 4 inches, and weight was up to nearly 5,000 pounds. Styling themes and features and the powertrain carried over, although the shift to net horsepower ratings dropped it from 365 to 212. Performance was predictably terrible, taking nearly 11 seconds to get to 60, while averaging 11 miles per gallon. But sales continued to climb, nearly 70,000 for 1973, when the oval opera window became standard, having been a popular option during the Mark IV's first year. It also got bigger bumpers, updating the look while adding 8 more inches and nearly 400 pounds. Special luxury interior packages arrived for 1975, offering additional colors, more wood accents, and even velour. Then Lincoln introduced the Designer Series for 1976, with color and trim chosen by popular designers of the period. They included a navy and cream Bill Blass, a gray Cartier, a light aqua and white Givenchy, and the red and silver Pucci. By this point, prices were up to $11,000 to start, and sales were just over $55,000. For 1977, with the Thunderbird moving down market, the Lincoln was simply restyled as the Mark V, on the existing platform, gaining another 2 inches. Styling remained conservative, gaining more glass area and front fender vents. Although the restyle did take the fuel crisis into consideration, losing 400 pounds and offering a smaller base engine, a 6.6-liter 400 cubic inch V8 with 179 horsepower and 329 pound-feet of torque, compared to the now optional 208 horsepower, 356 pound-feet of torque, 7.5-liter 460, which was now the biggest engine remaining on the U.S. market, but was no longer offered in California. Sales climbed above 80,000, making it the best year for the Mark series. Vinyl tops were no longer standard, but now were available either in full or Landau, although few were ordered without one or the other. The Designer Series and the luxury interior group packages carried over, with some color and style revisions. The Bill Blass was now midnight blue and chamois, or beige, the Givenchy jade and chamois, and the Pucci black and white. 1978 got an available carriage roof, CB radio, built-in garage door opener, and outside temperature display, and the fuel warning light was replaced by an LED miles to empty display. A Diamond Jubilee edition was offered to celebrate Ford's 75th anniversary and came with every option standard except the moonroof and CB radio. This included bucket seats and a center console. It was available in Diamond Blue or Jubilee Gold and cost $8,000 more than a base Mark V. The Bill Blass was now in browns, Cordovan and champagne, Cartiers were all champagne, and the Pucci silver and black. New corporate average fuel economy standards killed off the 460 for 1979. Dual exhaust also went away, but upgraded stereo options included quadraphonic 8-track or cassette and a floor-mounted seek button. The Diamond Jubilee carried over as the Collector Series, but with no opera window and the cassette instead of the 8-track. The Bill Blass was now two-tone midnight blue and white, the Givenchy crystal blue, and the Pucci turquoise and midnight blue with a white interior. The Lincoln would be the last large American car to be downsized in 1980, with both the regular full-size Continental and the Mark VI moving to Ford's Panther platform. The cars were essentially the same thing, with the Mark VI having a Continental hump and an opera window. You could even get it as a four-door now. Two doors were 216 inches long on a 114-inch wheelbase, and four doors 219 inches long on a 117-inch wheelbase. Weight was 3,900 to 4,200 pounds. Engine choices were Ford's 302 and 351 Windsor V8s, or 5-liter and 5.8-liter, backed by a 4-speed automatic with overdrive. Both engines had 140 horsepower, but the bigger engine had 35 more pound-feet of torque, if you were interested in towing. New features included keyless entry, digital instrumentation, with an available rechargeable flashlight and a toolkit, and perhaps one of the most pointless options ever, touring lights, dim fake headlights mounted on the covers of the hidden actual headlights. The Designer Series carried over mostly unchanged, and the Collector Series was renamed Signature Series. Starting prices were now near $16,000, and sales dropped under $40,000, but it still outsold the regular Continental. For 1981, the bigger engine went away, and the regular Continental would be renamed Town Car to make room for a new, smaller Continental. For 1982, the Pucci edition moved from the coupe to the sedan, and the Cartier moved to the Town Car. 1983 saw the Givenchy move to the smaller Continental, and the Pucci returned to the coupe for the second half of the year. The Mark VII of 1984 moved to the Ford Fox format of the Mustang and Thunderbird, with a greater emphasis on handling and performance, not to mention being a giant aerodynamic leap forward that included composite headlights, the first in the U.S. market, although the traditional styling cues remained, both front and rear. It had effectively become a coupe version of the mid-sized Continental introduced in 1982. Wheelbase was down to 109 inches, length 203, and weight 3,700. The car had four-wheel electronic anti-lock brakes with air suspension and a power trunk lid, and the 8-track was replaced by a car phone on the options list. The Designer Series was now limited to Bill Blass and Versace, and a new Luxury Sports Coupe, or LSC package, was offered. Base price was now $22,000. The 140 horsepower 5-liter V8 carried over, with 250 pound-feet of torque, moving the car to 60 in about 10.5 seconds, and the quarter mile in the high 17s. The only optional engine was a BMW turbo diesel with 115 horsepower and 155 pound-feet of torque. For 1986, Continental would be dropped from the name, making it simply the Lincoln Mark VII. The unpopular diesel was also dropped, and the LSC was up to 200 horsepower, and lesser models to 150. The LSC also gained analog gauges instead of the standard digital ones. For 1988, the Bill Blass was the base version. All versions got the 225 horsepower, 300 pound-feet of torque, high-output version of the V8 from the Mustang GT. 60 took 8 seconds and the quarter mile 16, with a top speed near 140. It was the peak sales year of the Mark VII, just under 40,000, more than double the year before. 1990 saw interior updates that included a driver's airbag and rear shoulder belts. Then in 1991, the Bill Blass got the LSC upgrades, except the analog gauges. The Mark VIII arrived in 1992 on a new platform, although it was still shared with the Thunderbird. It was more driver-oriented, with four-wheel independent suspension and a dual overhead cam V8. The 4.6-liter, 280 cubic inch engine produced 280 horsepower and 285 pound-feet of torque, reducing acceleration times by about half a second. Wheelbase was up to 113, length to 207, and weight to 3,700 to 3,900 pounds. Aerodynamics were improved, and the Continental hump was now pretty much just a hump, and no longer resembled a spare tire. Only one trim level was offered. The LSC returned for 1995 with 10 more horsepower and sport-tuned suspension and axle ratio. A Lincoln Diamond Anniversary Edition was offered for 1996 that included a voice-activated phone. Then the Mark VIII got a facelift for 1997, and the Continental hump got even smaller. 1998 would be the last year, but the LSC still gained traction control and firmer suspension. The last 3 years, sales were around 15,000, so it's no surprise it was canceled, particularly considering the Ford Thunderbird and Mercury Cougar it shared its platform with went away a year earlier. Although not always considered a Lincoln or a Continental, the Mark series offered the best of what Lincoln had to offer, regularly being the most luxurious, best performing, and best selling. Lincoln has toyed with the idea of bringing the series back, showing a prototype of a Mark IX in 2001, but two-door luxury coupes are all but a non-existent market segment these days. And in 2006, Lincoln effectively made all Lincolns Marks, with the Zephyr becoming the MKZ, the mid-sized SUV the MKX, the pickup the MKLT, followed shortly thereafter with the town car being replaced by the MKS, and even more would follow. Fortunately, this madness came to an end in 2019 with the return of real names, so perhaps it is time for the Mark Series Continental to make a comeback. As always, thanks for watching. Don't forget to comment below and like and subscribe.